The Beacon Vet Clinic was drowning in the early morning gloom as the first rays of sun barely managed to pierce the heavy blackout curtains. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of cat food, and the old air-conditioning unit hummed softly in the reception area. Dr. Ellie Miller, a woman with tired eyes and a warm smile that she reserved for the most challenging patients, was finishing her overnight shift. Her shift was drawing to a close, but the morning already promised to be heavy. On the registration desk lay a card with a chilling note. Euthanasia, cat, no name. Ellie sighed, adjusting her glasses. She hated cases like this. In her 20 years of work, she had seen hundreds of animals whose lives were cut short due to indifference, poverty, or simply human cruelty. But something about this card made her heart clench. The cat was pregnant, very pregnant. She had been brought in the night before by two people, a middle-aged man and woman with cold expressions and hurried movements. "We don't want her," they said, dropping the carrier by the reception desk. "Just put her to sleep. We don't want the kittens." Ellie tried to ask questions, to suggest other options, but they were already gone, not looking back, leaving behind only the echo of the slamming door. In a cage in the corner of the examination room lay the cat. Her fur, which had once been shiny, was matted, and her green eyes looked out with such a deep sorrow that Ellie felt a chill run down her spine. She approached closer, knelt down, and quietly called out, "Hey there, little one." The cat lifted her head, her ears twitched, and she slowly, as if disbelieving the kindness, crawled towards the wire grating. Ellie opened the door, and the cat, lumbering heavily because of her rounded belly, pressed herself against the doctor's hand. Her warm flank, solid with the future lives growing inside her, touched Ellie's palm, and in that moment her hand trembled. She couldn't do it. Not today, and not to this cat. "You're not just a cat, are you?" Ellie whispered, feeling a lump tighten in her throat. "Are you fighting for them?" "Yes." She knew that euthanasia was not the answer, but the clinic's rules were strict. If an animal was not claimed within 24 hours, its inevitable fate awaited. Ellie looked at the clock. 6:30 a.m. Time was running out. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number of Marilyn Davis, a volunteer she had worked with for years. Marilyn was a woman in her 60s with unflagging energy and a heart that seemed big enough to shelter every stray animal in the county. "Marilyn, I have a situation here," Ellie began, trying to speak calmly. "A pregnant cat. She was brought in for euthanasia, but I can't do it. We have 24 hours to find her a safe place. Can you help?" A sigh was heard on the other end of the line, but it was not one of irritation. It was full of determination. "Send me the photo and description, Elle. I'm calling the girls now," Marilyn replied. And Ellie felt a warm wave of hope run through her chest. She took a picture of the cat, naming her Cassandra on the chart after the prophetess who saw the future but was never believed. The name fit. There was a wisdom in the cat's eyes, as if she knew her destiny hung in the balance, but still believed in rescue. By noon, the clinic was buzzing with life. While Ellie was treating other patients, a limping terrier, a Persian with an ear infection, Marilyn and her team of volunteers were working tirelessly. They called local shelters and posted messages in rescue chats, searching for temporary fosters. But the answers were all the same. "No space." "Pregnant cats? That's too complicated." "Kittens? We can't handle it." By 3:00 p.m., hope began to fade. Ellie secretly watched Cassandra, who lay in the cage, grooming herself with a surprising grace despite her condition. "You won't give up, will you?" Ellie whispered, stroking her through the grating. At 5 o'clock p.m., Marilyn burst into the clinic. Her gray hair was disheveled, and she held a notebook full of addresses. "I found one," she exhaled. "A temporary foster home. A family on the outskirts of the town is willing to take her for a couple of weeks, but only until she gives birth. After that, we'll figure it out." Ellie felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she held them back. She knew this was only the beginning. Cassandra had to give birth, and the kittens had to survive. And all of it depended on people who, like Ellie, could not turn away from someone else's trouble. The carrier with Cassandra was loaded into Marilyn's car. The cat sat calmly, as if understanding that she was being driven toward a new life. Ellie watched the car drive away and thought about how unfair the world was. Someone discards a living creature, while someone else is ready to fight for it until the very end. But within that unfairness was a thin thread of hope. Cassandra had been given a chance, and Ellie knew she wouldn't let go of this story until she was sure the cat and her kittens were safe. Marilyn's car stopped at a small house in an older neighborhood, surrounded by overgrown hedges and a slightly weathered fence. The evening light gilded the roof, and the smell of freshly baked cookies and stew drifted from an open window. The Jensen family, an elderly couple, Brenda and Thomas, had agreed to shelter Cassandra until she gave birth. Their home was modest but warm, with faded wallpaper and shelves filled with photographs of their adult daughter, who had long since moved out of state. Brenda, with soft wrinkles around her eyes, met Marilyn at the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Where is she? Our little guest?" she asked with a tired but genuine, kind smile. Cassandra was carried into the house in the same carrier where she had spent the last day. The cat looked wary, but when Brenda gently opened the door, she didn't bolt to hide. Instead, Cassandra slowly emerged, sniffed the air, and looked at Brenda with her deep green eyes, as if assessing whether she could trust this place. "Oh, what a smart girl," Brenda whispered, kneeling down. "Don't be afraid, darling. You'll be safe with us." Marilyn, standing nearby, felt her heart swell with relief. This was not a shelter, not a cage. It was a real home, temporary but full of warmth. Cassandra, as if understanding her role as a guest, behaved flawlessly. She chose a corner in the living room where Brenda had laid out an old blanket and settled there, tucking her paws neatly beneath her. Her belly, heavy with kittens, rose with every breath, and Marilyn noticed how the cat would sometimes freeze, as if listening to the life inside her. "She will give birth soon," Marilyn told Brenda. "Maybe in a day or two. If anything happens, call Dr. Ellie Miller at the clinic. She's on standby." Brenda nodded, but a hint of worry flashed in her eyes. "We'll manage," she said firmly. "It's not the first time we've helped someone in need." Labor began overnight, accompanied by the rhythm of rain drumming on the roof. Brenda didn't sleep, sitting on the floor beside Cassandra. The cat was breathing heavily, but made no sound, only looking at Brenda with such trusting certainty that the woman involuntarily recalled her own daughter as a child, equally defenseless and strong at the same time. The first kitten, a tiny girl with black fur and a white spot on her face, was born around 3 a.m. She was followed by another girl, a red one, with a perpetually grumpy expression, as if the world had already managed to disappoint her. The last born was a boy, gray with a fluffy tail, who immediately curled up by his mother. Cassandra, exhausted but calm, began to groom her kittens, and Brenda, unable to hold back her tears, whispered, "Good girl, you did it." In the morning, Marilyn arrived to check on Cassandra and found Brenda feeding the cat. The mother lay on the blanket, and the 3 babies, still blind but greedy for life, pressed against her. "They are so tiny," Brenda said. Her voice trembled with delight and fatigue. "But so strong, just like her." Marilyn nodded, feeling the warmth spread through her chest, but the joy was short-lived. Thomas, coming out of the kitchen with a cup of tea, coughed quietly and said, "Marilyn, Brenda and I are leaving next week. A work trip. Our daughter asked us to help her move out of state. We can't leave them here alone." Marilyn froze. The time they had given Cassandra was expiring, and there was no new place for her and the kittens yet. Marilyn returned to the car, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew that finding a new foster home in a week was an almost impossible task. Most volunteers were overwhelmed, shelters were full, and kittens, though charming, required special care. She called Ellie, who listened and then quietly said, "Bring them to my house. I recently finished a quarantine period for an old rescue, so I'll set aside a separate room for them. We won't let them go down now." Ellie spoke calmly, but her voice held a steely resolve that only appeared at the most critical moments. The move happened quickly. Ellie lived in a small apartment on the 5th floor, which was already home to her 2 cats, rescued years ago. She prepared a small room for Cassandra and the kittens where she used to keep books and old belongings. Now there were bowls of food and water, a litter box, and a soft bed. Cassandra, as if understanding that she had been uprooted again, entered the room with dignity, carrying one of the kittens in her mouth. Ellie carefully carried the others, feeling their tiny hearts beating beneath her fingers. "You're home," she whispered. "For now, you're home." The next few weeks were a trial. The kittens grew, their eyes opened, and they began to explore the room, clumsily bumping into walls and squeaking when they couldn't find their mother. Cassandra watched them with maternal strictness, but without fuss, as if she knew her task was not only to feed them, but also to teach them to survive. Ellie, returning from work, spent hours with the babies, checking their weight and health, and teaching them to use the litter box. At night, she sat at her laptop, sending messages to volunteer groups, begging for homes for the kittens. "They are special," she wrote. "They survived when no one wanted them. Give them a chance." One evening, as the kittens slept curled up next to Cassandra, Ellie noticed the cat watching her. There was no fear or despair in that gaze, only gratitude, and something else that Ellie couldn't explain. She knelt on the floor beside her and ran a hand over Cassandra's soft fur. "You know I won't give up, right?" she said, and the cat purred softly in response, pressing against her hand. In that moment, Ellie understood that this cat and her kittens had become a part of her life. But she also knew that their future depended on whether she could find them a real home, not a temporary one, but one where they would be loved as strongly as she herself had begun to love them. Dr. Ellie Miller's apartment had turned into a small oasis for Cassandra and her kittens. The room dedicated to them now smelled of milk and fresh straw that Ellie had laid in the bed. The kittens, now 6 weeks old, began to explore the world outside their blanket. The black girl with the white spot, named Stella for her curious eyes, was always climbing into the box of books, getting stuck between the pages. The red one, with the perpetually grumpy look, was named Roxy. She was the first to learn to hiss, defending her food bowl. The gray boy, the calmest, was named Smokey. He preferred to sleep nestled against Cassandra, occasionally looking out at the world with cautious interest. Ellie, coming home from work, would sit on the floor, watching the kittens learn to walk, stumbling and squeaking when they fell. Cassandra watched them with maternal pride, but her eyes, as green and deep as they were that day in the clinic, often sought out Ellie's gaze, as if the cat wanted to say, I know this isn't forever." And Ellie, petting her, felt her heart clench at the truth of that statement. The kittens were growing up, and it was time to place them in new homes. But the thought of parting with these tiny beings whom she had helped save was unbearable. Marilyn, as always, took on the main task of finding families. She posted ads on social media, called acquaintances, and even went to the local farmers' market, where she handed out flyers with pictures of the kittens. "They are special," she told everyone who stopped to listen. "Their mother almost died, but she stood strong. They deserve the best." Ellie, listening to her stories, couldn't help but admire her. In her 60s, Marilyn was like a hurricane, sweeping away all obstacles on the path to animal rescue. The first breakthrough happened a month later. Stella, the black kitten with the white spot, attracted the attention of an elderly woman named Mrs. Helen Albright. She came to Ellie's apartment, leaning on a cane, her eyes full of contained sorrow. "My cat passed away 6 months ago," she admitted, looking at Stella, who immediately climbed onto her lap. "I didn't think I could do it again, but this little one, she seems to know what I need." Ellie saw Stella purring, pressed against Mrs. Albright, and knew it was destiny. The parting was bittersweet. When Mrs. Albright carried Stella away in the carrier, Ellie cried, hugging Cassandra. "One has flown the nest," she whispered to the cat. "Now it's your turn, girl." A week later, Smokey left. He was adopted by a young couple, Sarah and Alex, whose 5-year-old daughter, Mia, dreamed of a kitten. Ellie talked with them at length, checking if they were ready for the responsibility. "We will love him," Sarah promised, showing a photo of their cozy apartment where a cat tree already stood. Mia named him the Gray Prince. Smokey, as if agreeing, nudged his nose into the girl's palm, and Ellie, seeing them off, felt a mixture of joy and pain. Cassandra, watching her son leave, lay down on her blanket, as if understanding that her family was shrinking. Only Roxy, the ginger kitten with the strong personality, and Cassandra herself remained. Ellie and Marilyn doubled their efforts, but finding a home for Roxy proved more difficult. Her grumpy expression and habit of hissing at strangers deterred potential adopters. "She's just protecting herself," Ellie explained during one meeting with an interested party. "She will be the most loyal pet if you give her time." But people shook their heads. "Too complicated. We need a calmer kitten." Ellie came home feeling the world's unfairness weighing on her shoulders. Why couldn't Roxy, so spirited and strong, find a home? Why was Cassandra, who had stood against death, still waiting? By this time, Cassandra had been spayed. Ellie herself assisted in the surgery, holding her paw as the cat fell asleep under anesthesia. After the procedure, Cassandra recovered quickly, but a new trait appeared in her behavior. She became even more affectionate, as if thanking them for every day she had been given. Ellie, looking at her, thought about how unjust it was that this cat, who had survived betrayal, was still waiting for her chance. But deep down, a flicker of hope warmed her. If Stella and Smokey found homes, then there would be a place for Roxy and Cassandra, too. One evening, Marilyn called with news. "Ellie, I found a woman. She wants to meet Cassandra. She says she needs an adult cat, not a kitten. She's coming tomorrow." Ellie froze, holding the phone. Her heart pounded faster. This was a chance, but also a fear. What if this woman wasn't the right fit? What if she didn't see in Cassandra what Ellie saw? Cassandra, as if sensing her anxiety, approached and nudged her forehead against Ellie's knee. "We'll find you a home, girl," she whispered. "I promise." The next day, Eleanor Ellie Vance arrived at the apartment, a woman with gray hair neatly pulled into a bun and eyes that spoke of a life fully lived. She sat on the sofa, and to Ellie's surprise, Cassandra immediately went to her, jumped onto her lap, and curled up in a ball. "I lost my husband 2 years ago," Ellie said softly, petting the cat. "My house is empty. The kids have moved away. I just want someone waiting for me in the evenings." Ellie felt tears well up. This was the moment she had fought for. But Roxy, sitting in the corner, watched the scene with her usual distrust. And Ellie knew that for this little one, the fight wasn't over yet. Dr. Ellie Miller's apartment, once noisy with the pitter-patter of tiny paws, now felt too spacious. Roxy, the ginger kitten with the eternally grumpy face, had become the mistress of the windowsill, where she sat for hours, watching the falling autumn leaves. Her eyes, as green as her mother's, were full of expectation, as if she knew her story was not yet finished. Cassandra, her mother, lay nearby, occasionally touching Roxy's ginger flank with a paw, as if to remind her, "We're together, little one." Ellie, watching them, felt her heart break a little. Stella and Smokey had already found their homes, but the search continued for Roxy and Cassandra. Today, Ellie Vance, the woman who had chosen Cassandra, was due to arrive to discuss the move. But the thought that Roxy might be left alone was unbearable for Ellie. Ellie Vance entered the apartment with the same calm confidence as the first time. Her coat smelled of rain and freshly cut grass, and in her hands she held a tote bag from which cat toys and a packet of treats peeked out. "I have everything ready," she said, smiling at Ellie. "I already have a bed, bowls, and a cat tree at home. My husband, bless his heart, always dreamed of a cat that would meet us at the door." Cassandra, hearing her name, lifted her head and slowly approached, nudging her forehead into Ellie's palm. Ellie watched this scene, feeling tears approach her eyes. This was the perfect home for Cassandra, warm, quiet, and full of the love this cat had been so deprived of in her previous life. But Roxy remained the problem. Ellie told Ellie about Roxy's complex personality, how she hissed at strangers and hid under the sofa, but was incredibly loyal if given time. "She doesn't trust people," Ellie confessed, looking at the ginger kitten curled up in the corner. "But she is so full of life, so strong. She deserves someone who will see that." Ellie paused, her fingers still on Cassandra's fur. "You know," she said quietly, "I was only thinking of taking one cat. My house is big, but it's empty. My children are gone. My husband is gone. Maybe I can manage 2? Mother and daughter together. That seems right, doesn't it?" Ellie froze, afraid to believe it. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. Ellie nodded. "Let them be a family. I want them to be happy." But Ellie knew that Roxy was a challenging cat. Her wariness demanded patience that not everyone possessed. She suggested that Ellie come back for a few days so Roxy could get used to her. "I want her to love you," Ellie said. "She shouldn't be afraid." Ellie agreed, and the following days turned into a quiet ritual. Every morning she came with a small bag containing treats and toys. She sat on the floor and read old poems aloud. Her voice was soft and gentle in the room, and Roxy, wary at first, began to approach. First, she just watched from a distance, then she started climbing onto the sofa, and by the end of the week she was eating from Ellie's hand, allowing herself to be petted. Cassandra, lying nearby, purred as if approving of her daughter's choice. The day of the move was the hardest for Ellie. She helped pack Cassandra and Roxy's belongings, their favorite blanket, the toy mouse that Roxy loved to chase across the floor, and some food. When Ellie Vance led them away in the carrier, Cassandra looked at Ellie with her green eyes, and in that look was everything: gratitude for the rescue, a farewell to the temporary home, and a promise to be happy. Roxy, as always, sat with a grumpy expression, but her ears were no longer pressed back against her head. She trusted. Ellie closed the door and sank onto the floor, crying from relief and pain. She had saved all of them: Cassandra, Stella, Smokey, Roxy, but the emptiness in the room was deafening, like the echo of that night when she first refused to put the cat to sleep. A month later, Marilyn brought news. She had visited Ellie Vance and returned with photos that made Ellie smile through her tears. Cassandra was sleeping on the windowsill, bathed in sunlight. Her fur shone, and her eyes were calm as never before. Roxy, no longer quite so fierce, was playing with a rope toy, and in the background the cat tree was visible, entirely covered in ginger hairs. "They're happy, Elle," Marilyn said, hugging her friend. "You gave them a chance." Ellie nodded, but her thoughts drifted back to the day she first saw Cassandra in the cage, abandoned and doomed. She thought about how unfair it was that such creatures depended on human kindness, which was so rarely found. But within that unfairness was hope. People are willing to fight for them, like her, like Marilyn, like Ellie Vance. Cassandra's story changed Ellie forever. Returning to the clinic, she began to look at every patient differently. Every animal that came into her hands was not just a case, but a story worth fighting for. She began spending evenings with the volunteers, organizing fundraisers for shelters, and teaching young vets to see life in every patient, not just a diagnosis. One day, while sitting over a cup of tea with Marilyn, she received a message from Ellie Vance. A photo of Cassandra and Roxy sleeping together on a soft blanket with the caption, "Thank you for giving me a family." Ellie cried, but these were tears of joy. She remembered the moment when her hand trembled, refusing to euthanize the cat who had gifted the world 3 new lives. That moment became her compass, a reminder that even on the darkest days, there is room for light if someone is willing to fight for it. Ellie continued to work, saving other animals, but Cassandra and her kittens held a special place in her heart. She kept their photos in her desk drawer next to the note from Ellie Vance. Sometimes, on especially difficult days, she would take out those pictures and look at them, remembering how one cat taught her to believe in miracles. And somewhere out there, in Ellie Vance's cozy home, Cassandra and Roxy purred, greeting their owner at the door, proving that love and care can heal even the deepest wounds.